Most of us have been thought to think of pleasure as a luxury, something nice to have if there's time after all the work has been done. Many of us even think of it as something selfish or frivolous. But what if that is completely backwards? What if pleasure isn't a luxury at all? What if it's actually a biological need? And what if treating pleasure like it's optional is one of the biggest reasons that so many women feel disconnected from themselves, from their bodies, from their relationships, from their desires? Because if that's true, then the conversation around pleasure isn't nearly as trivial and frivolous as we've been led to believe. It's actually essential. And that is what we're talking about today. So, Barbara, I was recently thinking about this comment I saw in response to one of my recent Instagram posts where I was talking about pleasure and aging and all these things. And it was a comment from a woman, and she wrote something like, "Sex is stupid anyway. There are more important things." And what struck me wasn't the comment itself, because I completely understood why she might feel that way, right? Like if pleasure has mostly felt like an obligation to you, like it's like a performance, like it's caretaking, or if there's been disappointment or pressure around it, like it's, one more thing on the to-do list, of course it wouldn't seem important, right? But my question to you to kick us off in today's conversation is, what do you think women lose when they stop seeing pleasure as something that matters?
I strongly believe women lose access to themselves. I know that from personal experience because pleasure isn't just like bubble baths and orgasms, it's the language of your body
Yes.
saying yes, like your true motherfucking yes. Like, this is a yes. It's not a maybe, it's not a no, but I'm going to say yes. It's a hell fucking yes. When a woman is disconnected from pleasure long enough, she often stops asking, what do I want? What
Yeah.
feels good? What turns me on about being alive? And eventually, she doesn't lose pleasure. She loses her relationship with her own desire. That's
Hmm.
really,
Yes. Yes. Okay. So when a woman stops thinking pleasure is important, she loses access to herself, to her relationship with desire. That's what you said. And I just wanted to say it again because that's so accurate. As you're saying it, every part of my body's like, that's exactly what happened. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to you. I think we see that happening all the time in women that we work with, women that join the Central Sisterhood. And what's interesting is, none of us were born believing pleasure was unimportant. Like, if you've ever watched a toddler, they're like little pleasure seeking missiles, right? They're curious, they're sensory, they're embodied, and they're constantly moving towards what feels good and away from what doesn't. So that tells me that somewhere along the way, something happens to us. And what's interesting is that this isn't just a personal story. It's not just my story or your story. It's a cultural story, because when we look back in time, there were actually periods of human history where pleasure and sexuality and embodiment were viewed really differently than they are today. So I want to take a minute before we talk about why pleasure is so important to us and how to bring more of it into your life, because I know if you're here with us on the show, you're waiting for that. I want to talk about how we got here for a minute, right? Because if women weren't born disconnected from pleasure, then they were trained away from it somehow, right? Like we inherited some systems. So, do you have thoughts on like what created that rift? Because once upon a time, we lived in a world where pleasure was essential, where sexuality was viewed as it's the sacred way to get to God, right? Like through sex is how we connect with the divine. Where the feminine was revered, where pleasure was like a virtue, a value. And then a whole bunch of things happened, and we'll get into those a little bit. But what do you think was the first rift in the matrix, if you will, around that philosophy?
I mean, I think, I don't know, I don't know exactly. I have to like check books and like historical
Yeah. You're like,
documents.
I'm not ready for a history lesson, Marta.
I mean, I can't give you the exact pinpoint of factual time period,
Yeah.
but what I find is accurate is that humans at their core, at the primal level, we want belonging, we want love and acceptance. We're going to do whatever it takes for love and acceptance. And somewhere was flipped the script where women started being praised for being useful. Our value was put on how we look, how we can behave, how we can follow the rules, do what's expected of us. And, again, going back to the primal level, that coded in us, okay, this is how I get the love and acceptance. It stopped being about our turn on, like going back to that toddler thing that you said. Toddlers are naturally turned on,
Yeah.
and somewhere in childhood development, from like toddler age, maybe around 4 or 5, you start to see, if I behave a certain way, once you get more language and understanding, I'm going to get more love and approval. I'm right if I am a little bit quieter, if I'm not as loud. But the turn on is our true nature. We stopped getting praised for being our truest selves and
Yeah.
shining our light that the divine has placed in us. We learned to be easy. We learned to need less. We learned to take care of everyone first. So pleasure feels selfish because many women have been conditioned to believe their value comes from how much you give, right? So, but a woman who is connected to her pleasure doesn't give less. She doesn't give less love. She doesn't give less creativity. She actually gives more because she's giving from overflow instead of depletion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to dig into that because there's also like there's a neurobiological reason for this. Like there's a lot going on here, but indulge me for a minute while I do talk history because I started as I was preparing for this episode and thinking about, okay, if we weren't taught that pleasure was important, if we were taught that being useful was important, which you said and I agree with, and that interrupted our natural tendency to seek pleasure, right? How did that come to be? Like, I'm just fascinated with how we ended up here. And here are the three like historical inflection points I just want to point to. So it kind of like, as you listen to this, listen with your body, listen for how true it feels in your life experience versus like intellectualizing it. Okay. So three main things. One is in that time before where we were more hunter gatherer, right, where we lived in groups and women were constantly in circles and we raised each other's babies, right, like you're giving birth and another woman's like helping with this and then someone's feeding the baby and someone's feeding you, right, like we lived in that kind of a system where pleasure had a whole different meaning. And then we started to own land, right? That was like the first shift from like survival to ownership. And so everything around how property's inherited and who belongs to which family and like what's the social order started to shift that. And it started to become like, oh, okay, if we want a woman to stay and take care of my land and my babies and my family, that starts to shift the narrative into usefulness from pleasure. Then religion was the second thing, right? A lot of ancient traditions had viewed sexuality, like I was saying, and fertility and embodiment as sacred. And then religion, Western culture increasingly started to elevate sacrifice and self denial and obedience and restraint, right? So pleasure becomes suspicious, desire becomes dangerous. And the idea of the good woman being someone who gave and sacrificed and served and endured. Now that's the woman we want, right? And then we get to the industrial age where the modern world is now like, oh my gosh, how can we be more efficient, more productive? How can we achieve more and accomplish more and produce more? So notice how over that trajectory we went from like pleasure as the primary purpose. How do we get more pleasure and avoid pain to how do we produce more? Who cares about pleasure? It's not about rest. It's not about embodiment. It's not about connection. It's not about feeling good. It's about getting shit done. And here we are today where the world is driven in like a constant dopamine loop, right? It's that loop. Like, what have you done for me lately? How can I get a quick hit of something that keeps me going? Guess what? Women are not wired for dopamine. Men are wired for dopamine. That's like their primary hormone that moves, keeps them going. They want to win, they want to do stuff. Whereas for us, we want oxytocin. That's what drives us. And the culture does not encourage that. It devalues that. I'm gonna pause there for a minute because I just threw a lot at us, but I think it's like so important in terms of the context.
Just want to say it's not that we're not wired for dopamine. I actually would like disagree with that because actually pleasure is, and it goes back to even the religious stuff that you were saying. It's like, look, when it was valued and pleasure was valued, there was that concept of sex magic, which is an ancient concept and it still exists. Sex magic is autonomy because you understand how to use sex to manifest things that you want in your life. The church, religion, whatever came in and was like, oh shit, that means we can't control them. We need to take that away and we need to replace it with the self sacrifice because then they will sacrifice and give to us and their allegiance. But the truth is, pleasure is actually one of the original biohacking tools. We spend so much money trying to optimize our nervous systems, our moods, our energy, our creativity, and yet one of the most powerful fucking tools that lives inside our bodies is this. It's when a woman feels and like safe enough to soften, to surrender, to experience the deep pleasure and orgasm, there is literally a cascade of chemistry that happens that they might have not known exactly the words for it back then, but they knew this happened. So your body starts flooding with dopamine, which is the desire chemical for women. It's the energy of I want, I'm motivated, I'm excited about life. Then what happens within a woman's chemistry is like, so then that becomes like pursuit, what's possible for a woman. It's like, oh shit, desire comes online. Then oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical, which is the feeling of I'm connected, I belong, I can trust, right? Huge, because then you have self trust, right? That's a big deal. Safety creates that expansion. Then endorphins happen, your natural bliss chemistry, the body's own pleasure medicine that can support relaxation, reduce pain perception, and create that euphoric life feels good feeling. Like I used to take pills for this. I used to take pills to get this experience or like just go to the gym, which wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Prolactin, then that's the satisfaction and completion hormone that rises after orgasm. It's that deep exhale, the feeling of I'm full, I'm nourished, I don't need to chase, I am self sufficient, I am self possessed. So then your nervous system can shift out of constant striving and into receiving.
Yeah.
That's why it's not frivolous, but we've been made to think it's frivolous because that's when you become more sovereign in your life, when you have that full chemical cocktail. And this is where it comes back to manifestation for me, because it's not that you had an orgasm and magically like a Ferrari just shows up in your driveway.
Big tool though.
I mean, maybe soon, one day, if you're doing it long, like, right? But it's that you had, like, it's that pleasure changes the state of the woman creating the life. She
Yeah.
has self trust. There, like, the doubt starts to disappear. A
Yeah.
woman who is shut down, exhausted, disconnected, and resentful and is moving through the world differently than a woman who feels alive, worthy, and connected and turned on. She asks differently. She receives differently. She risks differently. She sees opportunities differently. Her capacity has expanded because she feels safe to hold that Ferrari, right? She's
Yeah.
not like, if a woman who is in constant overgiving state right now, running around doing, doesn't even know how to receive a compliment. If a Ferrari showed up in her driveway, she'd be like, what do I have to do? Oh no, this is too much. Take it back. Like,
Totally.
really think about that right now. If you're listening to this and you really got the huge thing that you think that was impossible right now, like for whatever the Ferrari is for you, would you really be like, of course, thank you? More, please. No,
Yeah, or would you be waiting for like the other shoe to drop around the corner?
oh my God, who's going to go to prison? Everything, who's going to die? You know,
Yeah.
and that's the reason why it's so hard to get it, because your body is like, no, even if your mindset is absolutely like, yeah, I'm going to get the Ferrari. But if your body doesn't know how to hold it, forget it. And I've done that. I've had opportunities in my life where, like, even as early on as recently, where I was 2 years ago, I uncoupled with my partner. I started dating immediately, like afterwards. I go on a second date and I'm like, fall in love with this man. And I am convincing myself that there's no way the universe would send me love right now because I'm still grieving my ex. And I could not believe it. Was like I had to negotiate with myself, because actually what I did was set myself up in my body for that, but my mind hadn't caught up yet. So it was
Yeah,
like, oh
totally.
my God. And then I couldn't hold it. And I was like, this is what happens. It's like the body and the mind need to catch up with each other, and orgasm actually gives you that experience to hold more, not just through the chemicals. And it's like the biohacking. It's like I think about it and it's like I probably would be on a whole slew of drugs. I no shade to anybody having to take like any of the antidepressants or anything like that. I was on that stuff for
Yeah.
like in my 20s because I had no idea, wait, I could do for free and feel so much better and like operate so much better, get more done in my day, feel good, even if I didn't finish everything I needed to do. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it does. It like,
Yeah.
and if anybody who's listening to this has had an orgasm recently, you know how great you feel after, like a real true orgasm, whether it's with yourself or with someone else, doesn't really matter. It's a different operating system. You're powerful, you're confident, you feel your truth. You're like, yes, I am that woman. It gives you back the confidence, the self trust through the hormone experience.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that whole neurochemical cascade, the cocktail of pleasure, which PS isn't only through orgasm, although that's like a really potent, like sure thing about in terms of triggering that cocktail, but lots of other pleasurable experience can also trigger those. I do want to come back to the point though about dopamine versus oxytocin, and here's why. Because I brought that up to point to the fact that we've built a culture that rewards women for producing like machines while starving us of what keeps us alive. Because while it's true, we also need dopamine. This isn't a man versus woman thing, but the research has shown that men are more driven by dopamine, more receptive to it. Like it's what keeps the system going, right? They want to win, they want to achieve, they want to check the box. That is what drives them. For women, we are much more relational. We
Correct.
need a sense of belonging and connection, right? And oxytocin is the hormone that is primarily driving us. So when we live in a culture that is dopamine driven, it's all about what have you done for me lately? What's the latest accomplishment? Like even think about when you meet strangers at like at a cocktail party or whatever. It's what do you do? Who cares what I hate that question. I'm like, I mean,
Yeah.
I love talking about what I do, but I hate that that's the question because that is the least interesting thing about me, about my life. You know what I mean? About like who I am. And it speaks to this cultural narrative of like what you do, your identity is based on what have you produced and achieved, not how you feel, how you relate, how you experience life, how alive you are. And that I think is the problem. So,
Yeah, because see, then yes, then that I understand your point better now. Because while dopamine does, it's created by both of us. That's
yeah,
where it stops. For us, it's oxytocin is the next one, and for them, it's vasopressin.
yeah.
So that's where it becomes a little bit like nuanced. And for us, we need this is why women need community,
Mhm.
where we feel like the oxytocin part is why we need to feel safe. We need to feel connected. It's like after you make love with a lover,
Yeah.
you want to maybe cuddle and stuff, and they might not feel, if it's a man, they might not feel as keen to have that experience because for them it's more vasopressin, which is vasopressin is the hormone of create, like they want to protect, they want to keep you safe, they want to take care of you. And for us, we're like, we want to belong. We want to feel that trust. We want to feel held, right? So
Right.
our society is like dopamine focused, where like for women, immediately we have a drop. It's like if you don't have aftercare as a woman, you could be traumatized and not want to have sex today because you've had the dopamine hit from sex, but the oxytocin wasn't reciprocated, so that can create trauma for you, which is part of why we created the
Yeah.
sensual sisterhood. Because it's like pleasure has three parts. First part, planning. Second part, execution. Third part is digestion, which that's the oxytocin. It's that connection that I can trust you. And
Yeah.
our society is like, that's where celebration comes in. It's like we did that, and our society is dopamine, 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 dopamine.
Yeah.
There is no part one, there is no part three. It's only we're in a constant loop of part two, part two, part two, and our
Yeah.
bodies
Which
biologically
completes us. Yeah.
have not. We're in a state of dopamine constantly. It's the algorithm, dopamine. It's insane. It's also not good for men either. Like they're not living their highest optimal levels if
Of
they're
course.
constantly in a dopamine loop as well. But it makes us crackheads, like
Yeah.
literally.
Yes. But men can function in that cycle much
Yeah,
better and are prone to in
yeah,
part because they don't have a lunar cycle. They're not cycling every 28 days or so. So it's a different model. And that's where I think it's important to honor those things. But I think the most important piece of this when we're talking about why pleasure isn't optional is like I want everyone to understand that it's actually vital to your health and well-being. It is not dessert, right? Which is optional. Dessert is optional. You don't need dessert to survive. Your body needs nutrients, it needs nourishment for you to survive. You can skip the cake and the ice cream, and that is how we've perceived pleasure. But pleasure isn't the cake or the ice cream, it's the fucking nutrients. It's the essential amino acids and the proteins and the shit you actually need. And so I want to reframe it and I want people to start thinking of it as it's not something you have to earn. It's something you get to practice regularly, daily, right? And so
yeah,
as we move into talking about how to bring more pleasure into your life, how to reframe this, how to cultivate it. I want to be really clear that like what Barbara and I are going to share, we're going to share some things, but this isn't about having more information. Your body already knows how to experience pleasure. This isn't about like more coming in. What you need isn't more information. You need permission to actually experience pleasure, to make time for pleasure, to prioritize pleasure, and you need practice because like anything else, it's not literally a muscle, but it's metaphorically a muscle that gets stronger and easier and you experience more pleasure from the same rep if you're doing the reps consistently, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about how, first of all, pleasure starts long before the bedroom, right? Talk to us a little bit about that. Where does it begin? How do we start to like reconnect with it? Because I think a lot of women will hear this and they hear what we said about orgasm and they're hearing the message about sex and they're like, "Okay, if I can make sex better, that's my like lottery ticket to pleasure." But I think you got to work with pleasure even before you get to the
correct.
sex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we just went over like we just fast forwarded to like, and the biohacking thing is true, and it's like, but it does start on just a level of to me, what does pleasure actually even mean? It's the five senses. It's touch, taste, smell, vision, and um,
Sound.
sound. It is something that will activate your nerve endings. It then, and through the nerve endings, your senses are activated, and that's what feels good. So I could, you know, a great way to start incorporating more pleasure and get into that, to start getting yourself on the road to that biohacking, like hormone chemistry, chemical pleasure cocktail that we're talking about, is even in the mornings. I have coffee that I love so much. And when I open the bag, I will smell, like I will take the time to be like, ah, and I'll be
Yeah.
like, ooh, I can feel that smell going through my senses right into my pussy. Immediately, I'm turned on, right?
Yeah.
And I have not done anything. It's like when food is orgasmic, that is a pleasure state. Like women can derive pleasure from anything
Yeah.
external without ever even having to touch your
Yes.
pussy. That's how sensual we are. So you don't even need to play with your pussy yet. You don't need to play with any erogenous zone yet because you could just start coming back to the basics. But we can go through the tips all you want, but that's the only tip we're going to give you today because come to the Sensual Sisterhood and we'll fill you up with the small tips to get you on the pathway to the bigger experiences.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I really want to talk about sisterhood because for like, I know for me and I think for you too, all of this only had a very surface effect until I started practicing pleasure tools in sisterhood, right? It just didn't stick. It didn't root. It didn't become an actual practice for me. But I will offer this, which is like a slightly different angle on the tip you offered, which like for me, I think I used to try to frame it as like what would feel good right now. And that became problematic because I think the cultural messaging about pleasure being frivolous and extra and not essential falls into that space. Like whenever it's like, well, what feels good? Then it feels like I'm just being hedonistic, right? Which I mean, hedonism is not wrong, but it's not all that we're talking about. So I started to reframe it as like, what would feel really nourishing right now? Because to me, nourishing has like deeper pleasure roots, and it's always sensual. So not productive, not responsible, not impressive, good, but in a nourishing way. And so maybe just asking yourself that question is a start. But to your point, Barbara, this is why the Sensual Sisterhood exists because women don't need more information. You already know pleasure is good for you. You already know it makes you feel good. You already know orgasms are enlivening, but we don't make it a priority, right? We don't slow down enough. We don't receive enough. We're always giving, giving, giving. Maybe we get into like some self-care and like we get our nails done or our lashes done or whatever is your thing for self-care. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just taking good care of yourself. That's a piece of it. I'm talking about what are you putting in your body, or how are you nourishing yourself, mind, body, and soul in a way that just really feels nourishing and good. And when we do it in sisterhood, when we have a place where like that is why we're gathering, we are gathering to practice pleasure together. We normalize it, right? We normalize pleasure. We normalize wanting. We normalize receiving and connection and aliveness. And we don't really do this alone. We do it in relationship. Like before I started down this path, I had done all the things, all the therapy, all the self-help, all the modalities. I'd been certified in meditation and yoga and sound healing and breath work and you name it. Like I had invested in it as a way of trying to heal myself and feel as alive as possible. The missing ingredient, the one that changed everything, that like put all those things together, was pleasure, right? It was like making this delicious recipe and forgetting like the key of forgetting to add salt or butter or whatever's like the stuff that makes it all meld together and be really delicious. So I will just wrap that by saying pleasure isn't something that you earn after you've like finished living. It's how you stay alive while you're living. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's, yeah, staying alive and yeah, it's your aliveness.
So if you're like, okay, I feel this, understand what they're saying. I'm starting to shift my view of pleasure as this like thing I get to have after I've taken everyone else. Come check out the Sensual Sisterhood. The link's below in the show notes. You can join us for free. We meet together every week, multiple times a week, and actually practice these tools live in sisterhood. Um, because pleasure isn't a reward. It really is the fuel. It's like I think so many women think that they're exhausted because they're failing, because they're doing something wrong. They need like more discipline. They need a new program. They need to whatever is the thing. But actually, I think it's because most of us are trying to like run our life without an essential nutrient that our body needs. And that nutrient is pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I
So
mean,
if this rings true to you, come join us.
yeah, I just leave you with the question of what if pleasure is the fuel that helps you remember that you're more than enough?
Love that. What if pleasure is the fuel that helps you remember that you are more than enough? Ah, chef's kiss. Perfect way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back here next week. Until then, you can find us inside the Sensual Sisterhood.